I'm very pleased and excited to have Dr. Sunita Purushottam, Head of Sustainability, Mahindra Lifespace Developers Private Limited, to join us today. Dr. Purushottam is a champion in sustainability with over 20 years of strategy and environmental consultancy experience, with over 50 plus engagements executed. She wears different hats as a CSR Council member at Mahindra and Mahindra, a proactive working group member at the World Business Council of Sustainable Development, a certified GHG emission quantifier, and fellow at Royal Met Society London. Dr. Sunita has worked with regulatory bodies in UK and India in various infrastructure development projects and city planning. She is well versed with various reporting frameworks such as SASB, GRI, CDP, and integrated reporting. She has authored many white papers in sustainability and is a speaker in national and international forums. She will bring us a clear understanding of why the issue of greening the supply chain and accounting GHG emissions is relevant for any company, especially for MSMEs. May I request you to please unmute yourself, Dr. Sunita, and take over. Um, Dr. Sunita, are you able to unmute yourself? Okay, I have unmuted you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Happy to be here. Uh, so I'm Sunita, as very nicely introduced by Megha, and we are trying to work with our suppliers and contractors. Being in the real estate, our value chain comprises of not just the materials that we procure, but also the contractors who are at our location. So there is a very deep relationship that we have with our value chain members for developing the buildings and the infrastructure development that we do. So I'm going to touch upon how we want to create a framework to engage with our suppliers, and going forward, what is the strategy to deepen the engagement, especially in the context of greenhouse gas emissions, and why. So next slide, please. So the value chain approach is important, and it is about understanding how we work in a collaborative fashion to minimize risk, improve efficiency, and encourage innovation. So these are the three key pillars that could help us get greater value, which is much more than just the direct operations of the company. So getting minimization of risk associated with the environmental impacts, especially in the context of climate change, also reputation risk, upcoming regulations in the context of GHG emissions. And as all of us know, that if we look at energy efficiencies and material efficiencies, we will touch upon more efficient GHG inventory in sense of reduction. So these, and if you look at how materials come, where do they come from? Again, we are, looking at GHG emission reduction. A lot of innovations can be done both in the process of developing a particular product, and also procurement of innovative products and more efficient products. Again, there is a direct touch point with reduction in GHG emission. Next slide, please. So, and we are calling it a value chain instead of supply chain, because value is a word which helps us enhance the entire outcome of any activity. And therefore, it is a value chain instead of the supply chain. Next. And in this value chain, who are the partners? So we undertook a value chain mapping right from land acquisition to the product handover and use phase. And we look at raw materials and labor, and that is where we are looking at our contractors and our materials. So all of these are associated with how we construct and then how we hand over. Next. But it's in the planning stage that we will have to look how we collaborate and what we procure, how we procure the materials, because planning and design is very key to the outcome and the use phase emissions associated with our product. Alternative materials, certified high quality materials, local sourcing are also key in emission reduction. And of course, how we construct and the way we construct, we will have to achieve resource efficiency. Again, that is linked to the GHG emissions. Next slide, please. Okay, so a variety of ways of looking at pollution mitigation and the efficiency improvements. It's a continuous improvement the program that has to be put in place. The two key areas are, of course, looking at materials, and the other is more efficient construction. So one of the key ways is to identify waste streams and measure and identify the opportunity cost of the waste, and of course look at a mechanism to reduce the bias towards to move towards innovation and to minimize the wastage of materials. And it is linked to the GHG emissions, because the more you waste, the higher would be your GHG emissions. Next. The other aspect, of course, is human rights and health improvement. In a way, the human right aspect, especially of occupational health, is linked to the emissions from the fuel in form of air pollution. So that's another element of occupational health and safety which is linked to emissions. Next. So our value chain ecosystem comprises of materials, people, and services. I spoke about contractors and suppliers, but the services are also a key part of our ecosystem, where we look at variety of consultants, design consultants, management consultants, people who project manage our sites, and so on. Apart from that, we have companies like who help us manage the services for our cities, and food and beverage services earlier, as well as the events. So services also are important, and explaining to them how and what our expectations are around fuel usage and energy reduction and efficiencies is also important. Next. So the value chain approach is to create a framework to engage and institutionalize this process in the current, functional, the way we function within the organization with all the departments and the organizational processes. So this framework helps us integrate and institutionalize this process. So for example, in this year, we have actually put a KRA for all the people in the contracts department to enable us to reach out to all the contractors and the suppliers to sign the code of conduct. Next. So, what are our policies that guide our strategy? It's very important to have the policies signed off by the senior leadership. The policies actually provide that, the level of commitment uh, and a high level guideline for all the stakeholders to adhere to within the organization and external stakeholders as well. It is important that the policies are updated. So last year we rolled out a supply chain policy, the sustainability policy, and the green supply chain management policy was there. We revamped it a little bit to reflect our, the change in the approach, and fine-tuned it. So the sustainability policy has 4 pillars: sustainable products, sustainable offices, sustainable sites, and sustainable communities. So that is the scope of our sustainability policy. Next. So the 4 pillars of our policy, as I explained, we have a 100% green portfolio. Our sites, we are looking at 2 things: climate change abatement, worker welfare, and resource conservation. Sustainable offices, again, GHG emissions are very important, associated with our emissions from our offices, and communities, which looks at inclusive development in wherever we are operating. Next. One of the key policies that we rolled out was banning the single-use plastic. It's applicable for our sites and our suppliers, and we are looking at working with our suppliers for take back and recycling. Next. This is our current approach, where we are looking at quality, safety, and environment. In the environment aspect, which looks at reduction in GHG emissions, it is to procure major materials within 400 kilometers of the project site, recycled material of the products that we are trying to use in our construction phase, and certification of the supply of the recycled material. So this is what we are looking at, trying to procure green materials, which help us reduce the embodied carbon in our projects. Next. So, yeah, we spoke about 2 things for the contractors. There's a pre-qualification criteria, and we have factored the in the general contractual conditions. What are the things we need from a contractor's perspective? What are the do's and don'ts into the environment management system clauses? And I spoke about the local procurement and working with suppliers to take back materials. Next. Waste materials. So what lies ahead in terms of the code of conduct? We have rolled out the code of conduct. The code of conduct has levels. So there's a minimum level, then a qualifying level, and a leadership level. Signing of this code of conduct is important. All our suppliers and contractors have to be at the minimum level, which talks about basic minimum environmental and social compliances to be adhered to. Then all our suppliers and our contractors will have to undertake self-assessment, followed by a third-party assessment, that is like an audit. So the point here is that customers are now worse than the regulators. It could be a huge burden for the MSME segment to work with clients like us. The reason being that there is a lot of expectation from companies like us to adhere to set of the code of conduct and the self-assessment, and to undertake this journey. And it is in favor of the MSMEs themselves to be able to understand that all of these lead to 2 things. One is risk avoidance from a perspective of compliance, and the other is efficiency in operations, which will help in giving bottom line savings in terms of energy savings or fuel savings or efficient processes or innovation and so on. So yes, customers are therefore now worse than the regulators in terms of demanding what is expected in terms of GHG performance. Next. And it's not just related to GHG performance, it's the entire gamut of areas that the code of conduct has. The code of conduct can be shared with all the MSMEs to understand that, okay, what is the minimum level? It's a must have to do business with. Then there is a qualifying. So those who are at minimum will have to try and move to qualifying and then to leadership. It is like a levels that you have to achieve. And to determine your level, you will have to undertake a self-assessment and formulate an action plan for improvement. The same code of conduct can be used for site audits, where you are with respect to your specific asks that we have. Next. The self-assessment is very comprehensive, and as you see in the environment piece, GHG emissions and energy usage, air emissions, pollution prevention, all of that is factored in, and so on. So it's important to understand that GHG emissions is very important aspect for identifying opportunities for improvement, which will help companies mitigate risk and become more resilient in terms of their own operations. So it's not just a larger company is asking you to do it. It is in your favor to understand how it can help you identify opportunities. So uh, uh, any problem can be looked at in two ways. It's either an opportunity, or it can be looked at like something that you don't want to do. But once you embark on this journey of measurement, monitoring, understanding, and developing your inventory, you will understand that, hey, probably this I should factor this here because I haven't looked at the energy costs in this way before. Next. So that's about it, and I am done. That's my key message. It's important to look at GHG emissions accounting as a mechanism to identify opportunities for your organization's efficiency. Thank you.